welcome into another edition of Cornhusker Connection. I'm Brandon Shanahan, full crew today with Tyler Sprinkle and Brooke Byrne. Tyler's first episode as a husband, as a newlywed. How's that going for you, Tyler? Got the ring and everything.
It's
Ring
good.
season.
I'm slowly finding my place. Making a corner for myself when I get in trouble. I'm learning.
Some old newspaper and
Yeah.
ruffle it up.
Yep.
I love it.
You're right, honey.
Yep. You're always right.
Well, good stuff. A celebratory episode, obviously, with Tyler getting married, and also Nebraska won. They played last week. They won, and I'm sure everybody's very excited and happy about it and have no complaints about Nebraska having a winning record.
No.
I mean, maybe since I got married, they're never going to lose again.
You think that was the curse?
I got my ring, so now they're jealous and they're going to get theirs.
Yeah, I think we're on the right track. People say it was Frank Solich. Some say it was Brunette Herbie. No, the Tyler Sprinkle bachelorhood.
Yep. The worst thing to ever happen in Nebraska sports.
Well, really, if you think about it, I mean, since high school is when they really started to hit the shitter, which is right about, when people are eligible to get married in most
when I found my penis
environments. Yeah.
around the same time.
Well, just jumping into the game, Nebraska beats up on Northwestern. It was very ugly. Did not look good offensively in almost any way, minus that big play to Malachi Coleman at the end. Do you guys have anything good to say about the offense?
Next.
Emmett Johnson looked good.
Yeah. He did. Yeah, I'm happy with the running backs. Anthony Grant held on to it, which was nice. The running game was fine, I'd say.
They had their moments, It was nice to see them because it seemed like we committed to running the ball on first and second down, and it was nice to see us pop 5-8 yard runs every once in a while instead of getting stacked up after a 1 yard gain. But as soon as our offensive line starts finding our footing, we lose two more of them this week. So maybe back to the drawing board. Gosh.
I saw a tweet on Saturday that they had to stagger shifts in the tent because they just didn't have enough space in there for all the guys that were going down.
Yeah, Billy Kemp was just waiting his turn outside, crying with his family.
It was amazing to see Ethan Piper and Billy Kemp get hurt on the same fucking play. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, I mean, typically, at least, the football guys will, spread it out. Like, maybe one player this week, another player this week. Now, it's like, let's just get this out of the way now and, let them roll the dice there.
Also,
we do have to – go ahead, I'm sorry.
Our wide receiver core is all freshmen and sophomores now.
All from Nebraska, too. Can't be good for football, but I'd imagine good for vibes.
Yeah.
It's a tough scene.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say is thankfully, you got to count our blessings when we can. And thankfully, Billy Kemp isn't out for the year. Probably going to be out for a while, but they still end up coming back hopefully sometime this year.
Come back in just enough time to shut on the Hawkeyes, which is all I really care about. Good things. There were some good things. Tristan Alvano, I think, was my biggest relief, that biggest kind of breath of fresh air, because I was awfully mean to him for no real good reason early on to start the year, admittedly, but now he's made a field goal in Lincoln, and now all of a sudden I feel better. And it was a 45 yarder too. It
47.
wasn't like a 47.
Was that into the wind as well?
Yeah, into the wind.
It was probably good from 57 if we're being honest.
All the doubts all the unreasonable doubts I had about him are gone. I'm very happy that we have a kicker for the first time in years.
And he's strung a couple good weeks together. I think he's just our first 3 games, we had 3 attempts over the first 3 games. So he's finally getting his shot, and he's building that confidence and getting better every week.
Absolutely.
Defense was also stellar as usual. It's a weird feeling whenever I see a quarterback drop back and we're going to get a sack here. And then more times than not, they get a sack.
What do we have, 10 on Saturday?
I think it was 9, but we ended up with 8.
Obscene stuff.
Some names I want to throw out there that, at the beginning of the year you wouldn't have thought would factor into so much playing. Jamari Butler, whoever this James Williams kid is that just came out of nowhere and Rule brought him up in his post-game interview. Robinson, Ty Robinson looked good. Macker, however you say his name. It was nice to see it was a committee of guys getting in on it, but Jamari Butler especially, he is a freak.
Yeah, I'm really excited with where this defense is trending. Tony White. And the thing that I loved so much about Tony White that I wanted to bring up is at the end of the game, I feel like it's easy for defenses to just kind of sit back on their heels and wait for the offense to come to them. And we see so many times where that doesn't work out. And even in offense, I think we even kind of saw it in the Illinois game a little bit where Illinois couldn't get anything, not Illinois, Minnesota, where Minnesota couldn't get anything going all game. Then all of a sudden they put together 2 really good drives to eventually take the lead and beat Nebraska late. But this time they did not stop bringing the pressure. They kept everything dialed up, kept everything aggressive and said, this is working for us. This worked for 50 minutes of this football game. We're not going to change anything until, the final whistle's blown.
Yeah. And one guy we didn't mention, which I think was maybe the highlight, especially the first half, I think, was Gifford. I mean, he was flying around making plays everywhere all day. And being off the ball as far as he is, still coming down and making those plays is really fun to watch. Everybody was flying around, playing confidently, playing loose. It was really fun to see that defense have so much fun out there.
That screenplay in the third or fourth quarter, me and Tyler were talking about, where they had 2 blockers out in front and Gifford kind of ducked under them and made the play. That was almost a house call, and
yeah,
big momentum play there.
Excluding the Michigan game, I don't think there's been a single moment where I've seen this defense be anything other than extraordinarily confident and excited and energetic. And I think that's certainly not something to look over.
You could say, like, after the first couple drives in the second half against Colorado.
Yeah.
That's the only other game. But I agree with you. They always look to be buttoned up and in the game, engaged, even though you could make the argument that they could be upset because the offense doesn't do much.
Exactly.
So.
And also, I think after week 3 or 4, I was on here talking about it felt like we gave up too many third down conversions. And back to what Brandon said, I think he hit the nail on the head, the evolution of Tony White. Keep bringing the pressure on third down. Like you said, it had been working. And now these guys, even on the back end, being on an island, it feels like they're a lot more confident in themselves. So it's nice to know when we get to 3rd and long, we're going to get off the field and the defense is believing in themselves a little bit more.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's just them getting more comfortable in that 3-3-5 that they run, because we have a lot of older guys that have been in different systems in college before, so getting used to that 3-3-5 has probably been a little difficult for them. So it seems that they're getting it finally.
Absolutely.
Exciting stuff. There was a lot of bad stuff on the offense. I'll say this: the thing that I was most disappointed about, and Brooke kind of alluded to the eventual solution to this, but to come out first play of the game and have a drop back pass down the field across the middle, and a couple of plays later, it seemed like whenever they were having Henrik Harburg drop back and pass, bad things were happening. And when Henrik Harburg has been competent this season, it's been because he's been running first, and the objective is to get him downfield with his legs or side to side with some options. If you want to call it an option, he never pitches the football, but nonetheless, getting him out into the open and then kind of working some passes from there where you get him moving. Because for some reason, he's 6'5", still can't throw it over the offensive line. That's maddening to me. But
because he fucking throws sidearm all the time.
I don't get it.
So you see, not to cut you off, we'll continue your little rant that you got going on here, but it seems like when he's rolling out and he's out of the pocket, he's a decent enough passer, but he can't do it in the pocket because of his delivery, it seems. So you cut the field in half rolling out one way or the other which stinks. But if you got to throw the ball, I think that's kind of what you got to do. Unless you have him, like on that Malachi Coleman play, you have him drop back 10 yards and the line actually holds up for a little while.
Lots of ifs there.
Yeah, exactly. He's just not – his delivery is frustrating to watch, as you said.
And also, just watching him over the last 4 games, glad we're getting wins, but overall, he just looks super uncomfortable in the pocket. Whenever we do drop back and throw, he wants no part of sitting in that pocket. And when he does, it's very antsy.
Yeah, and I get that because of the line that we've had. Like they have not been as bad as we've seen them over the past couple of years, but they're still not super good. So I understand why he might get a little jittery. But with his jitteriness, he comes with indecisiveness that he has, like afraid to make that throw. And I don't know if it's because he doesn't feel confident enough to make that throw, like he doesn't know if he can get it to where it needs to be, or if he's like, he sees something, he's, oh, wait, this might be open. He's reading the wrong way, maybe. But yeah, there's things that if he worked on that passing mechanic, his delivery, I think he could be a decent passer.
Granted, he's 6'5" and played at Kearney Catholic, so he probably didn't need to really focus on refining his arm motion. But yeah, and there's a good fair chance that people around him are like, oh, well, he's going into spring as QB5. Like it's great that he's on the team and that he's continuing the Husker legacy in his family and homegrown and all that. But now you're in the spotlight playing Power 5 college football for a team that's not out of a conference championship appearance race.
Yeah. And I want to root for him so bad just because, as you said, he is a Nebraska guy. He's born and raised here. His family has strong ties to the program. It's just he's very mediocre. And yeah, he's winning games, which is great. But when he looks bad, he looks really, really bad.
It's disheartening to where the first play of the game you have, I'm sure the first 10 or 15 are all scripted and you know what's coming, and he missed that throw to Fedoni by 5 yards, 10 yards. It was.
If he hits him up the seam there, I mean, he has 10 yards to throw the ball. Just
even if
let
he
it
throws
sail
it out
on
in
him.
front of him and it's incomplete, it's like, oh well. But it was just so bad.
Yeah. I will say I am impressed that it seemed like he had collected his composure pretty quickly after that.
Yes.
Granted, he never looks comfortable in the pocket, so he's not going to be a whole different guy. He still wasn't very good throughout the rest of the game, but I'd imagine it's very easy to just rattle and completely collapse after your first 2 passes or interceptions, and for him to kind of just settle down and run the offense after that, I was pretty impressed with.
Yeah, I agree. He did settle in a little bit there. Even after the second one, that you could argue that it wasn't his fault necessarily, but just so early on, seeing 2 picks, you're like, here we go again. Like, I'm going to ruin the game for everybody. But the defense picked him up really nicely on both of those turnovers. So I think that helped him keep his confidence going throughout the game. Just I wish we just had some sort of life on the offense. Like,
it's just, even when he's running the ball, we run those speed options. It's like he fucks up in so many areas that he's never going to pitch the ball. He fumbled a snap again this week. I almost see the train wreck coming when we play Maryland, Wisconsin, Iowa. He's got to just clean some of it up and get more comfortable in his own skin playing. It sounds like going forward he's going to be the guy until we hear otherwise. So I guess I'm just looking for some areas of progression. And over the last 3 weeks, it's just been flat. It's been the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like he's getting any better.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the options, right? Brandon, we were talking about it during the game where I'm like, he should pitch that ball. I understand what you're saying, like keep the ball in your hands, so to limit the turnover risk there. But my main thought on that is if he's going to be our starting quarterback, he needs to protect himself in that situation by getting rid of the ball there. And you mentioned that it was on the short side of the field. So say he misses the pitch, more than likely it's going out of bounds, right? But instead he keeps it and gets drilled on that play. So it's more so him protecting himself. If this is our best option going forward, if he gets hurt, then it seems like we're screwed.
So 2 things there. First of all, my biggest pet peeve in the world is running speed options like that to the short side of the field. I don't know why it's ever a good idea, because the whole point of that option is that you spread everybody out and then you read your read man and then you create stuff in space. You don't have any space on the short side of the field. It works just fine when you work to the other side of the field, and then of course you make the read. You'd like to see him pitch it more, but that blows my mind that still happens.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Second point, I think kind of the opposite. I think, well, now that Jeff Sims is healthy, do what Henrik Harburg does best, and that's put his shoulder down, get downfield, because I don't think the gap is that big to where if you do have to go to Jeff Sims, I don't think it's like going from Cade Klubnik to going to whoever they have up in Eastern Iowa. I don't think the gap's that big. Because I also wanted to point out that on the depth chart, it's still Henrik Harburg or Jeff Sims. Granted, if you're going to make the change, you're going to make it out of the bye. So moving forward, it seems like he's 1A for sure. But even the coaches haven't, gone out of their way to put out a big gap there. So with that in mind, yeah, I'd say you run them 25 times a game.
And I would argue the other way. I think the gap is that big in my mind for favoring Jeff Sims, but we're winning, and you can't argue with winning.
My whole thought on the quarterback situation, it's real weird. But again, anytime you see someone being held out with playing under 4 games, you got to think the mentality is they're going to redshirt him. And maybe they just, want Sims in the system for a year to get comfortable. And, he's talking with Satterfield and picking Satterfield's brain. Maybe next year, you get a full off season with the program you're going to be playing for next fall. Eligibility nowadays is a huge thing, but I personally think they're going to try to redshirt him.
Interesting. That would make me very upset. Because now, granted, I see where you're coming from, and if they really think that highly of Jeff Sims, which they very well might, I think that's such a, I don't know, that's such a cop out, especially where you're at in the season now, where a bowl game is very much in the cards, and you look at this god awful division that they play in, and you think we could really do something pretty cool this year, especially looking next year. Next year is going to get way harder to get to the Big Ten championship game. How much of a momentum push would it be if we pushed out our best foot forward and, made a push for that? Granted, you really have to, play up to this team's potential to get there. But if I'm the coaching staff, that's more so what I'm looking at than getting, Jeff Sims another 2 years of eligibility, I'd say.
I agree, but just knowing how Matt Rule operates in year 1 of a rebuild, he's wholeheartedly just trying to get to 6 wins, it feels like, especially with the number of injuries we're going through. If we were to be able to get to a Big Ten championship game with Heinrich Harburg and the number of injuries we're going through on both sides of the ball, this would have to be one of the best Nebraska coaching jobs of all time with this roster after, having to flip their mindsets, winning 3 or 4 games every year and totally changing the culture. It just feels like Rule's just trying to get to a bowl game, and in his mind, we're not thinking about if it happens, great, but I don't even think that's on their radar.
You're not wrong. He does seem much, 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 much more patient than I am. So hats off to him.
Yeah. Than the whole fan base, I'd say.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But it's great that we even just have belief in that right now, that there's a chance that we could do that.
It's crazy. I mean, we're at the end of October and we're still not out of it. Well, I mean, assuming that Minnesota doesn't run the table, which would include being Ohio State, we control our own destiny.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's not nothing. So speaking of the quarterbacks, do you think that we should make the change? Obviously, Brooke, you bring up eligibility, but who should be QB1 for Purdue?
If he's 100% healthy, I'd like it to be Sims, but I do think we can win with Harburg, as we've shown the last 3 or 4 weeks. So
yeah, I think he's good enough to beat a team like Purdue. But when you start talking about Maryland, Wisconsin, Iowa, I'm not 100% super familiar with Maryland, the way they play. But I know for sure Wisconsin and Iowa, their defenses are so good, they're not going to let him run around. They're not. And then it takes away, not to be rude to Harburg, but that takes away the only thing he's good at. So and with a beat up line, offensive line, it's going to make it even harder for him to go around and do stuff against good defenses. So this week, I'd say keep Harburg. But if you were going to make the switch, this is the week to do it, to get him some reps against still a good team in Purdue. They're very feisty, but get him some game time before you go into the gauntlet.
It's crazy that the gauntlet is like Maryland and Wisconsin, considering how bad those teams typically are.
And I'm starting to feel I'm starting to feel a lot more confident about that Wisconsin game.
Illinois had them on the ropes for 3 quarters, and then just didn't finish the job. So,
story of Nebraska's life the past 10 years.
Man.
Yeah, so I think going into the bye week, I was thinking this is an opportunity to go back to Jeff Sims, get him a full week, get him a full couple of weeks to get back together with this team and to get, try to get as much cohesion as possible. And then you come out with Northwestern, one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. The next opportunity, and I kind of hate to say this, but I do think it is Henrik Harburg's job until he loses it. And I think that's by design, because I think it's easier to send Harburg out there. Harburg's a disaster. You're down 2 touchdowns against Maryland. And then you make the switch, bring some life into this offense with Jeff Sims, as opposed to coming out of the bye week, putting Jeff Sims in there. He's just as big of a disaster as he was to start the season. And then now you have to kind of teeter between going back to 2 very bad quarterbacks. So I think that it kind of feels like an emergency plan, and frankly, a pretty good emergency plan, I'd say, to have Jeff Sims ready to go at a moment's notice, to the point where if you need a spark, if you need to start airing it out more, if you fall behind, then you kind of have that up your sleeve.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I do agree with some of what you're saying. But if we lose a game, then there's no point to put Jeff Sims back out there. Well, I guess there is in a sense to win 6 games to get to a bowl game. That's the point. But I think he's had so much more time with the starters and in game. I think you just keep Harburg out there. I mean, it just makes the most sense. He's the most comfortable right now because he's getting those game time reps than having Jeff Sims go out there and try to get up to speed.
Yeah, that's not nothing.
I would just love to know, this is very hypothetical. Say we do beat Purdue and Michigan State, and we're 6-3. We're in the thick of the Big Ten West race. How Rule handles everything going forward, because he has that team believing in themselves, and you're 6-3, and you're sitting there like, holy crap! If we win these next 3 games, we're going to Indianapolis. Would he, put his foot on the pedal a little bit more, or are we doing the same thing, just plugging along with Harburg and the guys that are available?
Yeah, I mean, that's a crazy situation, because you look at, the next however many games it is, the easiest 2 are the next 2.
Mm-hmm.
So it's only going to get harder after that. Yeah, that's an interesting point, because then you also look on the flippity flop. Well, now Harburg's 6-1 with his only loss against, a national powerhouse in Michigan, or however that math comes out to be.
Yeah.
So that's like, well, I mean, if he's, and that's why I'm also not opposed to, Purdue is the worst team that will play the rest of the season. If you do want to make the switch, make it this week to where you have that margin for error. But I think above all else, I'm just kind of trusting the guys who are around the team and Coach Rule and Satterfield.
Yeah.
They know way more than I do. They know what's going to be. Like it just mentioned, they are far more patient than I am. So I am. Oh, whatever they decide, I am excited about. Lots of excitement. And the last thing I wanted to get into just about this previous week before we unveil our latest rankings. Were you guys watching the Iowa game live?
Yes, we were.
Oh, that was the best part of this weekend. I'm sorry, Nebraska, but that was incredible. I felt sick to my stomach. I was like, these guys are really going to do this again, where they're going to win on a special
said
teams
those
touchdown.
exact words when we watched it live.
Like that Jesse Pinkman clip. Like, he can't keep getting away with this. And they got away with it. And then to have it snatched on like some technicality. Wow. Oh, that was awesome. I wish I could inject that into my veins. I'd never. Yeah, that would be the best case scenario.
I see it both ways. Like, you should not be able to be waving your arms around in any situation when you're returning a punt. But also, there's no way the Minnesota defenders thought he was calling for a fair catch in that situation. Plus, there was 5 guys within 5 yards of him right when he fielded that punt. So either Minnesota's just that bad at, tackling. I don't know. It seemed like a cop-out, but it couldn't have happened to a better team.
I can't believe it. It was, and you're absolutely right. Like it's kind of feel like neither team deserved to win that game. I had 2 yards of offense in the second half. You don't deserve to win that game. And then Minnesota, like you said, they had the boundary helping them out, and then 5 guys surrounding Cooper DeJean, and they still couldn't get him 6 more inches out of bounds. You don't deserve to win that game either. But here we are. But yeah, absolutely. And then of course the faithful fans of Eastern Iowa drowning the field in garbage, pelting their cheerleaders with beer bottles. Yeah, couldn't happen to a better fan base, I'd say.
Also, I can't stand seeing PJ Fleck win, so that was a double-edged sword there.
I wish I would have known that Iowa's backup quarterback was so fucking fat. I would have been watching that game the whole time instead of just like the last 10 minutes.
And his dumb socks where they were pulled up and his knees were sticking out. He just looked like a goober.
I mean, outstanding stuff. God damn it, dude. How great was that? Especially as like a fan of a team who has seen their team lose so many games. I feel like we deserve to win. To see a team who constantly wins games that they don't deserve to win, finally the football gods have appeased us. Maybe even the football gods are putting an end to this after the curse of Tyler's bachelorhood. So shout out Tyler.
And everybody was talking about them going 11-1 and the AP poll finally having to rank them. So to see all of those Iowa fans be so high for a week and to lose like that is.
Well, at least they were good losers about it. I only saw level-headed. No, they were all pissy pants losers, all crying in their diaper about a rule that's pretty clear. I mean, the usage of it, I guess, is weird and invalid fair catch signal. I've never heard of that until Saturday, but yeah, it's in the rule book. It's the rules. You can't do that.
Yeah, it was just a weird situation.
Weird technicality, but oh my gosh, it couldn't have come at a better time. I'd imagine it's a similar feeling to being like a Patriots fan on the Tuck rule game against the Raiders, where I was like, we didn't deserve that, but it is a rule. It's a shitty rule. I can't believe they actually enforced it, but I'll take it. Yeah, I'll take it.
Bad.
But speaking of good, we got some new rankings to unveil here. I'm actually pretty excited about these. Kind of get into it here. I kind of had to redo my system because my whole thing was like tiers. Like, okay, well, this tier has a good win and no struggle losses, and then this team, has no good wins, but they have it. Well, it seemed like every team in that first tier struggled. Washington scored 1 offensive touchdown against Arizona State. Texas and Oklahoma were both pushed to the brink by bad Big 12 teams. which is saying something because the Big 12 is bad this year. So if you're a bad team in a bad conference, it's a bad time. Coming off of a bye week, the both of them. Of course, teams like Penn State picking up a loss, and I guess Georgia kept rolling. So I just kind of switched it to these are the teams that I think are just the best right now, excluding Ohio State. They're still in that lone tier. Where it's like they have good wins and they haven't really struggled against anybody. But after Ohio State, I just think these teams are the best. It is what it is.
See, you say that, and then you have Florida State who beat Duke by 20 essentially at 10. So
that game wasn't as lopsided as I think
it was. It was close for a while, but the final score is the final score.
Well, yeah. When the only way you can beat a team is because their quarterback goes out. I mean,
well, it's not the first game he's gotten hurt in. You know, Duke wanted to use that excuse when he got hurt against Notre Dame. Protect him better, or don't get hurt.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the big reason why I think Florida State's ahead of Duke in my rankings. I'm glad that we cleared that up. I didn't think we'd have to, but
it's weird that I don't see Clemson anywhere on your guys' rankings.
No, dude, Clemson stinks.
Much as, they do. Oh, yeah. Darn.
Yeah, I was wrong. I was wrong. Clemson stinks. Dabo stinks. Clay Klubnik stinks.
Yeah. Tyler stinks. You stink.
Yeah.
Whatever. So North Carolina, your guys' other ACC favorite. What happened to them this weekend?
Well, it's funny because
they lost a tough one, but they can still come back and beat the shit out of that shitty team.
Sure.
Well, because last week I had put North Carolina in my top 10. I'm like, man, I probably should have put Louisville in there. It didn't matter. The whole conference is garbage. So that's on me. I gave the ACC too much credit.
Well, they're going to have a national champion this year. So
yeah. We'll see about that. As long as Florida State doesn't have to play Oregon State, Alabama, Oregon, Penn State, Oklahoma, Washington, Georgia, Michigan, or Ohio State, they're in real good shape to win a national championship.
You just named 10 wins for them.
All right. Let's see. I'm trying to think of any other. It's still weird because it's like I don't. I guess now we're kind of getting to the point where we're seeing teams actually get to play other good teams. So,
real quick, obviously talking about the big game, the biggest game that happened this weekend, Ohio State, Penn State. I think I finally have a grasp on this Ohio State team now. I think their defense may be they are one of the best in the nation, if not number one. But their offense is the offense of an 8-4 team that gets bailed out by that defense time and time again because their defense is just so salty. And I wanted to believe Drew Aller was the guy to finally knock him down a peg, but he completed 30% of his passes, and he looked much to the effect of Heinrich Harburg. So very much out on this Penn State team, although I do think their defense is good as well.
Yeah, I think it's crazy because that is the biggest game of this weekend. It's been 33 minutes. We haven't brought it up once. We talked about Iowa for 15 minutes.
It was just
not even the best team in the state of Iowa, but oh boy, I forgot where I was going with that. Oh yeah, Penn State, Ohio State. Yeah, I think you're right, and I think it's an interesting kind of transition. Now, granted, when you go from C.J. Stroud to Kyle McCord, you don't really have much of a choice in this, but it seems like they're taking the kind of approach that I thought that Michigan took when they finally elevated. Like, we don't give a shit about having the best players or having the flashiest recruiting rankings. We just want to build a tough team that can beat Ohio State. Now I feel like it's kind of on the other end. It was like, okay, well, we've shown that we can compete with Georgia. We can show that we can beat any other team in the country. Ryan Day hasn't lost to another Big Ten team outside of Michigan. Like, all right, I want this team to be tough and big and strong enough just to beat Michigan. We'll figure the rest out later. God forbid we get a draw like Michigan and TCU last year. But that kind of feels like the formula to me is like, okay, well, we're getting tossed up by J.J. McCarthy, and they didn't even have Blake Corum last year, but getting tossed up, we got to be tougher. Granted, when we play SEC teams who don't play defense, we can kind of air it out and shoot them up a bit. But we got to toughen up against Michigan. And I don't know if that's just coincidence, just because they do go from C.J. Stroud to Kyle McCord, and that's just how this team looks. But that's kind of my best case scenario for Ohio State.
I do have a question for Brooke. No judgment here. I'm just asking your honest opinion. As your ranking is set, do you truly believe that Florida State is better than Michigan and Georgia?
No, I just do it to spite you guys.
Okay, that's what I figured that was the case, but I just figured I'd clear that up.
I think Michigan, if I had to pick one team, is far and away the best team in the country this year.
Mm-hmm.
I think Georgia is probably the second best, but no Brock Bowers this year. I might slide Florida State into that 2 spot right now, but I was going to ask you guys this, but I'll go first. If the season ended today just off the eyeball test of who I think are the best 4 teams, this is going to sound crazy, but I think the best 4 teams are Michigan, Georgia, Florida State, and Oregon. And I know they lost to Washington, but that Oregon team, watching them just run the ball down Wazoo's throat. Wazoo played pretty well for being on the road and a 20-point dog. And Wazoo kind of got up on them early, but there was no flinch. And if Oregon just kicks field goals instead of going for it on 4th down every time, they beat Washington. But neither here nor there. But what do you guys think? Who are the 4 best teams as it stands right now?
Yeah, I think, as you said, I think Michigan is like another level above everybody else right now. I can see what you're saying with Florida State and Georgia being kind of interchangeable, because while they are Georgia still, there are some questions that haven't been answered yet. So I do those 2 and 3. I really like what Washington has going on. Their offense is great, and their defense is really solid as well. But again, I hate playing the fence like this. But I also agree with what you're saying about Oregon. But the way that they just cannibalize each other every year is so fucking frustrating. But going with my gut, I'd go Washington number 3 or number 4 rather.
Yeah, it's interesting phrasing. It's very specific phrasing, because the 4 best teams, I would put Michigan. Well, by the way, to defend Michigan, I hear the sentiment, oh, they haven't played anybody. Yeah, and they've looked like that they haven't played anybody, because they've rolled everybody. They shut out Michigan State, who's a Power 5 football team. I think they shut out another Big Ten team. They should have shut out Nebraska, to be honest.
Yeah, shout out Josh Fleeks.
Yeah, shout out Josh Fleeks, hero, getting him a statue in the parking lot. Oh my gosh, what a disaster that would have been. But they've looked like the best team by a mile on every field that they've been on. It's like the Nuggets winning the championship last year. People say, "Oh, well, you played the 7th seed and the 8th seed." Yeah, and they blew them out. They swept the Lakers. They won in 5 games in every other series. They look like the better team, and I think that's the same thing with Michigan. Is that's just a competition. They look like they're playing a different sport. Florida State and Georgia, 2 and 3 interchangeable. I'm not a fan of Georgia's resume to this point, but that's not the question. The question was who's the best. So you do have to put them in there. By the way, I do think it's funny that all 3 of us have Florida State, not where we think that they should be, but just because we want to spite each other. I think that's very funny. And I'm very happy about that. I was really trying to find a way to keep them out of my top 10, but they're just really, what am I going to do? Put Utah in there? And then that 4th spot, if we're doing just the teams that I've seen with my eyeballs that are the best teams, Oregon looks awesome. I don't think that they have a real fault. They've rolled the bad teams. They probably should have beat Washington. Granted, and this wasn't the question, but I don't think that they would deserve to be in the top 4 over Washington, of course, or even above Oklahoma.
Just what you gut feeling. What do you think?
My eyeballs say that Oregon's the 4th best team in the country.
I'm just not in love with the 2 Big 12 teams, Texas and Oklahoma. I feel like they beat up on a conference that has a lot of bottom feeders, and they don't look like the other top 10 teams in my eyes.
I mean, they both came really close to losing against other not so great Big 12 opponents.
This time last week, I probably do put Oklahoma above Oregon, but that was a real stinker.
Yeah. And we got to get over. They did win, because that's the name of the game. Is just winning the game on your schedule. You're not going to blow out everyone unless maybe you're Michigan. Every top 10 team does have one or two of those, or hopefully just one of those games where they let a team that's not on their level play even with them for 3 quarters. But they don't look the part for me as far as playoff teams.
So that's an interesting question. But we do have some, speaking of playoffs, I did update some. Whoops, we don't want to talk about Heisman yet. That's next episode. Okay, so here's what our playoff would look like as is. 4 teams, top 4 ranked teams, Michigan, Ohio State. Also, side note, in our rankings, Ohio State and Georgia tied. They had the same amount of points. I gave Ohio State the bump because they were higher in our 3 rankings, and it was the AP who had Georgia significantly ahead of them. Well, I guess they finished 2 and 3, so it doesn't much matter for the playoff. But that's, a little bit insight on the rankings. And then I think Michigan and Washington would be an outstanding football game. I would love that. Then Ohio State Georgia rematch would be pretty fun.
So just going off these 4 teams, in my perfect world here, it would be Washington versus Georgia and Michigan versus Georgia and Washington versus Ohio State. Because then you truly, I don't know, it feels a little more even that way for those semifinal games. In a weird way, like I would never be able to describe why that feels better, but in my brain it feels better.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, and this isn't the same Ohio State team as years past, but it feels like we would get more of a shootout, Washington and Ohio State, where Michigan and Georgia would be a defensive slugfest. So that's what would be appealing to me if, CJ Stroud was still a Buckeye.
This isn't your grandpa's Ohio State team, though. This is a defensive team now.
Yeah.
That they're going to have to grind their way out on defense. So, and that's what you get in 3 of the 4 of these teams. The odd man out's kind of Washington with the better offense. And I think really in any of these 3 matchups for Washington, they would probably get beat pretty handedly.
Yeah. Which I think does make up for, if we get it, if things, continue to go the way, like another matchup with Washington and Oregon in the Pac-12 championship, with Oregon with just the 1 loss, Washington undefeated. I mean, I was so disappointed with the conference championship games last year. That in and of itself, I don't even care what happens in the other 4 conferences. That's awesome. Sign me up for that every time.
Yeah. And then plus the way I said, that means that we are guaranteed to finally see Michigan versus Georgia. Yeah, I want to see that game so bad.
Yeah.
I think that would be one of the best college football games of all time.
Oh, man.
Well, Michigan should have been there last year, but they couldn't get past the Council Bluffs kid.
Yeah. Couldn't get past the Texas Christian University Horned Frogs. What a disaster that was. How fun was that?
Real quick. Oh, wait. I'll say that for our Heisman talk, so go ahead.
Oh, yeah. But also, if we were in a 12-team playoff, here's what that would look like, which I don't see, a miss here. Ohio State Air Force would be kind of funky.
So much better. That one would be a disaster. That game would be an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
But everything else on this board, gets me a little tight in the pants.
I'm typically against rematches. I don't like Georgia, Alabama a couple years ago. I just saw this game 2 weeks ago. I don't want to watch this again. Yeah. Granted, it turned out to be an all-time caliber national championship game. So what do I know? But a Texas Alabama rematch where Alabama fights back for the rest of the season. Texas, either dominates the Big 12 or just finishes second fiddle to a rising Oklahoma team. That would get me excited.
And this is why I understand the 12-team playoff, but out of those first 4 matchups, the quarterfinals, I believe Oregon would shit down Ole Miss's throat. Florida State would beat Utah by 3 touchdowns. Ohio State would fist fuck Air Force.
No way you actually believe that.
What?
Florida State beating Utah by 3 touchdowns?
Absolutely.
You got to score 3 touchdowns against the Utah defense first.
I was going to say their offense is kind of bad.
Caleb Williams just put up 32 on him.
Well, that's
Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
actually, no. Some of a lot of those.
Notre Dame just held them to 20, but
one was a pick 6. Right. Or did Caleb Williams actually have 3 touchdowns? I'm not familiar with the game stats.
Yeah, they scored 4 I think 4.
Okay. I remember one was a pick 6 and I think one was like a punt return. But I see what you're saying. I think Utah's defense is so good that I think they could keep them in the game by themselves. 3 touchdowns, it to me just seems like a little bit of a stretch. But I do think Florida State would win that game. But I think
you're telling me Oregon State can shit on them, but Florida State would not.
It's like the Pac-12, like just cannibalizing itself. For some reason, when they play each other, I think they both just go down to the same level. And then when they play other conferences, they actually get up for it. I don't know. It's hard to describe. But.
I do think it is worth mentioning that I do think it's more likely that Oregon State or even UCLA could sneak into this playoff before I think Utah would finish out strong enough.
If UCLA got in, I would really throw up.
Because what, USC has 2 losses now?
Yeah.
To Utah.
2 losses.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't think UCLA would be in it. I'm just thinking who else in the Pac-12 could get after it. And yeah, no,
Oregon State,
sure. Yeah.
Oregon State maybe, but I don't feel too good. But I do think that does, set up the fact that okay, well now we do really get the 4 best teams in the playoff, where if TCU had to get through a team like USC last year before they played Michigan, I think that maybe that ends up a little bit differently, and Michigan and USC would have been a good game, and I don't know how exactly it would have shaped up, but I think if the whole end game is to have the best 4-team playoff, which this current system doesn't do typically, I think this is the best path for that. And then I think it also does give some type of credibility to those teams, even like Ole Miss or Utah in this situation, or the loser of Texas Bama, that, hey, we, this is an accomplishment. We did make it to the college football playoff. We did have a very successful season. Now we can capture this momentum where if Texas is playing in the Alamo Bowl, then who fucking cares? So I think that's the value there.
I think we got to get away from saying, let's have the best 4-team playoff and say the most deserving, because like Nick Saban was bitching about last year, he was like, well, we have 2 losses, but Vegas thinks we're better than some of these teams in here. Well, you lost 2 games. It doesn't matter what Vegas thinks. It's what you go out and prove and what you go out and earn. Like Michigan is far and away better football team last year than TCU, but TCU beat them.
Yep.
So
yeah, you're right.
I just
right, that is such a pet peeve.
Best teams. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the 4 most deserving teams.
Yeah. But it gives those teams an opportunity to earn their way in, because Michigan, Washington, Oklahoma, and Georgia, in this scenario before conference championships, they earn that spot by winning their conference. They're the 4 best conference champions. Then you have teams like Oregon and presumably Florida State, presumably Utah, or presumably Ohio State. Then now they earn their way in. So I think that it sets up for a better semifinal, even whether it's the 4 best teams or what should be the 4 most deserving teams. I think that's absolutely a win, and I can't wait for it.
Yeah, but then you have teams like Air Force getting in.
Well, good on them, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they deserve it if they win their conference, whatever. But
yeah, and I mean, well, and now granted, Air Force this year probably isn't the best example, and it's a little bit different now that those 4 teams are now in the Big 12. But like when you do have a team like UCF or Cincinnati who is far and above better than all the other Group of 5 schools, they should get their chance, And it's such a shitty thing if college football gets more fractured to where it is now, where the Group Power 5 is the NFL and Group of 5 is FCS football. I think any opportunity to kind of blend those 2 areas of college football, I think, is better for the product as a whole.
And I think I'm just more so saying that because I watched LSU just kill the Army. Like, what was it, 38-0 at halftime or something?
Well, but LSU's full of a bunch of terrorists. They obviously hate America. Have some respect.
Yeah.
This year, I'd have to say the best Group of 5 team is either James Madison or Tulane.
Which is bullshit. Fuck the NCAA.
Yeah.
Let the Dukes in. Let the Dukes play. It's fucking bullshit.
Well, I mean, no matter who it is, I think they would get curb stomped by Ohio State.
Yeah, but still, 2 straight years of great ball that they're playing, and they don't even get to have the chance to get blown out.
Yeah.
Well,
is that nothing? And like I said, I mean, that would be a huge boost for a team like JMU if they got in. We talk about how, I mean, I don't know what kind of a boost an academy school like Air Force could get. So they don't do things the same way as everybody else. But JMU, yeah, even if they do make the playoff and get shit pumped by Ohio State, that's incredible. That's such a big boost for them. You get all those eyeballs on your TV, on your football program. You get to, the university gets to benefit from it by their advertising of it. I mean, it's such a big deal to make the college football playoff that, yeah, I think JMU would, and any Group of 5 schools should gladly volunteer to get shit canned in round 1 in Columbus.
Yeah. I think there needs to be like a criteria though for some of these Group of 5 schools, just because if you look at Air Force's schedule, they absolutely should go 12-0 because they're going to be favored in every game. Where a team like Tulane, I understand they lost by 17 to Ole Miss, but Ole Miss is now ranked 12, and Tulane was without their starting quarterback. And like you guys point out, it was 2020 heading into the fourth quarter where, and they beat USC last year in a New Year's Six bowl game. Yeah. So that has to count for something too.
And I do think that at the end of the season, this will shape up where if Tulane does go undefeated the rest of the way, they win the American Conference, which is objectively at least has been a much better conference than the Mountain West. So they probably do get in, or they probably do get that highest ranked conference champion delegation. At least they should. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Absolutely.
But yeah, and this would look totally different if we fast forwarded to conference champions, because both Texas and Oklahoma aren't getting in here. Probably not, at least. Alabama would have 2 losses, likely. Florida State would be higher than they are, probably. We have an opportunity for Oregon to get in instead of Washington. If not, they have 2 losses. So Utah's going to have a few losses. So yeah, it's all to be determined. But I mean, I still think this is the way to do it.
Yeah, it's fun to talk about.
Yeah. Well, perfect, fellas. Anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up for the evening?
That's all.
Well, perfect. We got more Cornhusker Connection coming your way here this week. We obviously have Go Big 12 or Go Big Home, Brook, and the boys return. It was a good week for a couple of us. The last time that we got our bets in, so outstanding stuff. We'll be back. Go Big Red.
Go Big Red.
Go Big Red.